Hello and welcome to October's RDLA's legislative meeting. I'll be your host, Andy Russell. Today is Wednesday, October 14th, 2015, and we have a great agenda for you guys today. Thank you. First off, I want to thank all the patient advocates and patient group leaders, congressional staff, and any industry representatives that are joining us on the call today. Thank you for your time. Okay, on the agenda today, we have Stephanie Krenrich be talking about the ensuring access to clinical trials and be giving us a great update on that bill. After that, we have Remy Brim, the Senior Health Policy Advisor of the Office of U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren. She'll be talking about the Medical Innovation Act, Senate Bill 320. Following her, we'll have Isabel Lusada, President and CEO of the Amyloidosis Research Consortium. She'll be talking about the Amyloidosis Patient Forum that's happening with the FDA in November. Then we'll be joined by my colleague Max Bronstein, who will be giving us a 21st Century Cures and update. Then, rounding out the call, I'll be coming back on and giving updates about future RDLA events that are happening in D.C. So be sure not to be missed. Okay. Getting right started, I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie Krenrich, the Assistant Director of Policy for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And she's going to be giving us an update on the EACT. Stephanie, are you there?
I'm here.
Thanks, Stephanie. Way.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy, for the invitation to be here today. And I have some great news about the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act, S-139, which was introduced at the beginning of this year in the Senate. The Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act has passed both the House and the Senate, and it has been signed into law. So we're very excited about that. Those are the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation's National Advocacy Chairs, Rebecca Schroeder and Melissa Schiffman in that picture. And I just thought it was such an adorable picture. So it kind of conveys the excitement of the cystic fibrosis community, and I'm sure the rare disease community as a whole, that EACT has passed. So we were very happy to see that. And its passage was the result of a lot of hard work over a lot of months. And mostly I want to say thank you to the rare disease community members who are on this call today. It took a lot of work on the behalf of the rare disease community to make this happen. And it was all of your phone calls and meetings and emails to your members that let them know that this was important to the rare disease community that made this happen. So thank you so much for all of your work. We really could not have done it. This could not have been done without you. So we really appreciate it. And what Andy has asked me to do today is just kind of talk through the steps that we took to get there and how we ended up passing a bill. It's not that easy to do these days, and you know, I think we had a lot of help along the way from members of Congress and from members of the rare disease community and the cystic fibrosis community, and lots of other organizations were active in making this happen. So I'm just going to talk about that real quick about how this happened and how we got here, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. I should say, too, that this bill was signed into law by the President on October 7th. So it is all done. And just to give you a little bit of background, for those of you who maybe don't know a lot about the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act, maybe those who haven't been on previous phone calls, RDLA phone calls, when I've been on to talk about it. So what the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act did was it makes permanent a law that was put into law in 2010 called the Improving Access to Clinical Trials Act. And what happened was this original law, the Improving Access to Clinical Trials Act, allows those with rare diseases who receive SSI or Medicaid benefits to receive up to $2,000 in compensation for participating in clinical trials without that compensation counting against their income eligibility limits for SSI and Medicaid. So this is for the rare disease community. And how this came about is that the Cystic Fibrosis legal hotline, we were hearing from folks calling into our legal hotline that they were afraid to take part in clinical trials because they were afraid that the compensation they received would be counted against their income eligibility limits for SSI and Medicaid. And as you all know, Medicaid coverage is critically important, and SSI coverage is critically important when you're battling an expensive chronic disease. So we worked with then Congressman Stearns and then Congressman Markey and Senator Wyden in 2010 to pass the Improving Access to Clinical Trials Act. It was a big victory back then. We were so happy to see it happen. The only thing is that there was a 5-year expiration date on legislation. So what happened was in 2015, this bill was set to expire. So earlier this year, in the beginning of 2015, we started working with our champions once again to see this legislation, to see this law made permanent. So we worked with Senator Wyden on the Senate side and Senator Hatch. Obviously, they are the chair and the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, so they carried quite a bit of weight. So we worked with their offices to introduce legislation in the Senate to make the Improving Access to Clinical Trials Act permanent. We could not, they were invaluable partners in the effort. Obviously, we could not have done this without Senator Wyden and Senator Hatch and their wonderful staffs. So what we did in order to support their efforts, we put together a coalition letter that about 75 organizations ended up signing on to from across the spectrum. It was really incredible, and we made sure we distributed that letter to members of Congress asking them to support this bill. And simultaneous to Senator Wyden and Senator Hatch introducing the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Senate, Congressman Doggett from Texas introduced a companion bill in the House. So Congressman Doggett, Congressman McGovern, and Congressman Marino, they're the two co-chairs of the Cystic Fibrosis Caucus, all got together to introduce an identical bill in the House. So at this point we had bills introduced in the House and the Senate, and we had a letter of support from about 75 organizations. So this happened in January, and things were looking really good. We were hearing a lot about support for this. And then in March, the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act was put in a process called hotlining in the Senate, which is reserved for non-controversial bills. We were thrilled to see that happen, and it means that it can bypass the committee process and go right to the floor for a vote. So it got into that process, and we thought, you know, this is great. We are on our way. Things are moving along. We're all ready to go, and we were so sure that the bill was going to pass in March, and then it got held up. One senator put in, or I think it was two senators, I don't know who they were, but they put in anonymous holes in the bill. So the bill ended up getting held for months. But finally, it passed in July, and I think that had a lot to do with the tremendous amount of pressure that was being put on members of Congress by members of the rare disease community. During this time, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation had their annual fly-in event. Actually, we had two of our annual fly-in events in March and June. And then I know that other organizations, we worked closely with the National Organization for Rare Disorders and the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I know that their members were reaching out to their members of Congress. And I know that through RDLA that you all were told about this, and I know a lot of you were talking to your members about it. So it finally passed the Senate in July, and we were thrilled when it did. And then after that, the House really started to take a look at it. So in the House, so in the Senate, we ended up with 15 co-sponsors of the bill, which is really incredible. We were so happy to see that. And then in the House, we ended up with about 56 co-sponsors, which was great. We also had a hearing on this bill in the House in the Energy and Commerce Committee. They wanted to explore and kind of look into this legislation a little bit more and kind of hear more about it. So someone from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation testified before the Energy and Commerce Committee on this legislation in the House as they kind of looked into it. It was a great hearing on September 18th. And finally, and I think it was on September 28th, the House considered this, and a bunch of members got up on the floor and talked a little bit about the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act, and then they passed it in on September 28th. So we were happy that it passed both the House and the Senate. Ultimately, about 30,000 emails were sent from the cystic fibrosis community through our website to members of Congress about this bill. And we had about 400 meetings that I know of in the cystic fibrosis community about this bill with members of Congress. And I know that a lot of other members of the rare disease community also talked to their members of Congress about it. So this was a joint effort among all different members of the rare disease community to make this happen. So we were really happy that it did, and yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has about, how we made that happen.
Stephanie, that was a great overview, and thank you so much for giving that to all the advocates on the line. Right now I'm going to open up for questions. If you have any questions for Stephanie about the process of getting a rare disease bill passed on the federal level, now is your time to ask them. And I guess I'll start off, Stephanie. I was wondering if you guys did any advocacy on the at the executive level after the bill passed both the House and the Senate. Was there any, or what were the efforts to reach out to ensure that the President signed the bill?
That's a really good question, Andy. I did reach out to some contacts that I had at the White House. The reason I did it, I was sure, because the bill was so non-controversial, we were fairly certain that the President would sign it. The only problem is that the original Improving Access to Clinical Trials Act expired on October 5th. And we were very concerned that the President wouldn't sign it before October 5th. So I did some outreach to the White House that proved to be not real fruitful. And then I reached out to the Social Security Administration because they administer SSI. And just said to them, let's just say this law lags for 48 hours. Is this going to cause a big problem for members of the rare disease community? And what I was told is that because it had passed both the House and the Senate, if the President did sign it after October 5th, even if it was just a couple of days, that we would likely be fine, that it wouldn't be a big deal. So I did reach out to the agencies to make sure that nothing bad would happen to those who received compensation in the unlikely event that someone in the rare disease community received compensation on October 6th. I just wanted to make sure that no one was going to lose their benefits, and I was assured that they wouldn't. So, so that was the outreach I did to executive agencies.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any other questions out on the line? And just a reminder to all of those on the call this morning, you can use the chat function as well as the Q&A function to send me questions, and I can ask them directly to the speaker, or you can just speak up and ask them yourself. Your phone lines are unmuted, except for those that have a lot of background noise on them. So if there are any more... yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Sharon Drennan from BRBN Alliance. You mentioned some type of fast-tracking process that you engaged in, but I didn't catch the exact name of what you called that. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Oh, of course. So I was talking about how the bill was hotlined in the Senate. So it's called hotlining a bill. And you'll forgive me if I'm a House person, I'm not a Senate person, so you forgive me if this is more of a simplistic explanation. But the way that it works is when a bill is hotlined, it means that the leadership in the Senate and the leadership of the committees of jurisdiction and the leadership of the Budget Committee have all gotten together and said, you know what, this bill is non-controversial. We're fine if it bypasses the committee process and goes right to the floor for a vote. And then it's generally passed under unanimous consent. During this process, at any time, any senator can go in and put a hold on the bill and can go in and say, you know what, I have a problem with this bill. And it can be anonymous, and they don't have to tell anyone what their problem is, and they can just put a hold on it. So that's how our bill was held up, how the Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act was held up for a few months from March until July, because although it was hotlined, although leadership and the leadership of all the committees had said that it was okay, there were a couple of members who I guess had some extra questions or were looking into it or wanted to hold up the bill for a little bit. But in the end, the holds ended up being let go of, and the bill was passed by unanimous consent. So it was very exciting.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That sounds like a scary proposition to get your bill put on hold and who's doing it.
Yeah, I know. It was, and it was the kind of thing where I have to give a lot of credit to NORD and MDA because me and Paul from NORD and Kristen from MDA spent a lot of time in Senate offices saying, are you holding this bill? Is there any additional information we can give you? Because we didn't know who it was. So we just went to all of the, we knew it was a Republican office because it had been cleared on the Democratic side, so we just went to every Republican office and said, this bill is not controversial and it's supported by the rare disease community and it's bipartisan and it's great for the rare disease community, and we just made sure that they knew that we would give them any information they needed and try to make sure that we were really out there advocating for the bill. And in the end, the hold was released for whatever reason, and that was great.
Great. That sounds like some great advocacy on your guys' part, and great job on passing this bill. And I'm going to ask if there's any other questions on the line. Please feel free to speak up now.
I have a question. This is Steve Smith for Stephanie.
Oh, hi, Steve.
Hi. Is this $2,000 that's allowed, I think I understand it right, do I, that it's to compensate people for coming to clinical trials so they don't lose their benefits they need, and especially if they have expensive medicines or can't work. Does it also take care of the problem that some people simply want to earn money at work and doing a job even though they need the Medicaid due to the cost of their treatments? Or is this simply the participation in the clinical trials money?
This is simply participation in clinical trials. So it just allows folks with rare diseases to receive compensation for taking part in clinical trials up to $2,000 without it counting against their Medicaid and SSI. So it's a separate issue.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I don't over describe it, but it's wonderful and awesome. Nice work.
Oh, thanks. Great.
Are there any other questions out on the line? Okay, seeing as there is none, I want to thank Stephanie and thank you for coming onto the line and participating in the call this afternoon. Now I'm going to pass it along to Remy Brim. She is the Senior Health Policy Advisor for the Office of U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, and she's going to be talking about the Medical Innovation Act, Senate Bill 320. Remy, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for the invitation and the interest in Senator Warren's legislation. The Senator has been really interested in increasing NIH funding for quite some time, since the campaign. And one of her goals in office was to really elevate the conversation about the need for research funding. And I know that's something that y'all are so passionate about and have advocated so well for. And this Congress, we really have kind of reached a fever pitch on the need for increased research funding, and I know we're going to hear about 21st Century Cures a little bit later, some great research funding in that bill as well. And right now the Senate is working on the companion bill to 21st Century Cures, and we're trying to figure out how that we are going to structure the funding on the Senate side, because we don't have some of the same offsets and the same pay-fors as the Energy and Commerce Committee did in the House. So when we introduced this bill in January, we were looking at, this upcoming Senate process and how we could think about creative ways to pay for an increase in research funding that would rest within the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee or HELP Committee jurisdiction. So the idea that we came up with was to, instead of trying to create mandatory funding like the House did, we said that we would establish a payment that certain pharmaceutical companies would make back to the government when they would enter settlement agreements for illegal behavior. So we said that if you are a pharmaceutical company that has a blockbuster drug that brings in over $1 billion in sales, and that drug was somehow based on federally funded research out of the NIH, then you would pay 1% of your profits back into the NIH to help stimulate basic research and stimulate the pipeline of innovation. And we estimated that going back over the past 5 years, that if this proposal would have been in place, we could have generated about a 20% increase in funding for research at the NIH, or about $6 billion per year. We made sure that some of that money was directed towards unmet medical needs so that the rare disease community would really benefit from this increase in funding. This bill, we have some great support from a lot of rare disease groups already. We have a companion bill in the House, and we have some great co-sponsors in the Senate. So right now we are just trying to kind of keep the conversation elevated about the need for NIH funding and continue to think about creative ways to pay for the legislation that rests within our committee's jurisdiction. That's the overview of the bill, and I'm happy to take any questions about the process that we're undergoing in the Senate to introduce our companion to 21st Century Cures, or about the logistics of the bill itself.
Thank you very much for that information, Remy. I'm going to open up the line to questions now. So if there are any questions about Senate Bill 320, the Medical Innovation Act, for Remy, please ask them now or use the chat function or the Q&A function. Send them. Are there any questions out on the line for this bill? Well, Remy, I have a question for you. I was wondering what the companion bill in the Senate's number is.
That's a good question off the top of my head. Let me look it up for you real quick. HR 744, led by Congressman Van Hollen.
HR 744, authored by Van Hollen. Thank you, Remy. And I'm sure I will be sure to forward you any questions that I received from any of our advocates that were maybe too shy to ask them on the line this morning. So if there are any questions that you have about this bill, please feel free to send them to me, and I can forward them to Remy. Okay. Seeing that there aren't any more questions, I want to thank Remy Bryn from U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren's office for joining the call today and giving us information about Senate Bill 320. Thank you very much, Remy.
Thank you for having me, and happy to answer any questions offline.
Okay, now I'm moving forward with the meeting on to Isabel Lusada, the President and CEO of the Amyloidosis Research Consortium. Isabel, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk today and to talk about the upcoming meeting that we have with the FDA and how it really came about. And just briefly, the Amyloidosis Research Consortium covers all forms of systemic amyloidosis, and it's really a collaborative model of bringing together all stakeholders, the KOLs, the patients, industry, and regulators to really expedite development of therapies for amyloidosis. And at present, there are no approved therapies, but there are about 14 companies who are actively interested in working in this disease. And we're really, due to partly the complexities of the disease, but also the regulatory process, companies are turning away. So it's really a critical time in this disease. And I think it's something we're seeing across the board with rare diseases. So we were really focused on how we can break down the barriers with clinical trials and the regulatory process that really allow for timely evaluation of therapies. And we work very closely with all the patient organizations with amyloidosis that are supporting patients. And so actually in the January meeting that the RDLA had for Rare Disease Week, we were introduced to Dr. Woodcock. And she was really engaged and interested in the fact that the model that we had was really looking at how we can work with regulators but provide solutions. And so we came up with this plan with her to have a sort of series of meetings. And part of that, the appeal was that with the ARC and the infrastructure, we can do clinical trials. We have a network that's built within it. And the kind of collaboration and data sharing allows us to really fill the gaps of knowledge. And we're committed to developing diagnostic tools and things that will help the regulatory process. So we had a meeting. What was discussed was that we would have, initially there was one area that there's real consensus on within the field, and we submitted a white paper on biomarkers, which is going through the validation process. And then we had a meeting in September, which was really a scientific meeting to really identify where there is consensus. And it had all the KOLs, and it also had all the companies that are interested and the FDA. And so together it was a 2-day workshop to look at areas where there was consensus and how we can define those areas, and also areas that needed development. And following on, which is really what I'm sort of talking about and wanted to raise today, is that we are holding a meeting which is held by us, so it's not one of the patient-focused drug development meetings, but we're holding it in Silver Springs on November 16th. And in some ways, there are upsides and downsides to not having it on the docket of being one of the patient-focused drug development meetings. And the downside would have been that we would have had to wait for 2 years probably to do this, to get it on the docket. But the upside of our doing it is that we can really tailor and craft the agenda and what we want to get out of it to suit our community. And along with that, in the discussions with Dr. Woodcock, was the recommendation that we develop a draft guidance, which is along the lines of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy's draft guidance for Duchenne's, and how much that will really influence and help the FDA then, incentivize them to develop a guidance in response to our submission. So that's really where we're at the moment, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and also we welcome any of you to attend the meeting, and participation would be really welcome.
Thank you, Isabel. That was some great information. Up on the screen right now is information you will need to attend that amyloidosis meeting held at the Doubletree Hilton Hotel in Silver Spring, Maryland, on November 16th, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And if you want any more information about this meeting, you can go to arc@arci.org. All right. Are there any questions out on the line about this patient forum being held at the FDA? Any questions? Well, as always, if you are interested, you can send me an email, and I can contact Isabel for you. So thank you very much, Isabel, for this information about this patient forum with FDA. And seeing that there are no questions, I will move on.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Isabel. All right. Joining me on the call today is my colleague, Max Bronstein. He is the Senior Director of Advocacy and Science Policy at the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. And he's here to give us an update on 21st century cures and innovation for healthier Americans. Max?
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, so as Andy said, I've actually done this update a few times on the call before. Happy to say that we have some news on this front, but before I get into that, I do have to do some just very quick RDLA housekeeping, because getting questions about what does RDLA do, what do they not do. So I just wanted to clarify for folks that basically RDLA and the RDLA is really for it to be this kind of free and open resource, really sort of clearing that up to get patient advocates educated on issues, and then help them get engaged on things that could have legislative implications. I should also mention that RDLA does not actually take positions on specific pieces of legislation or endorse anything. It's just intended to be kind of a platform for communication, and it's really a resource for everyone in the rare. So, out of the way, let's at the topic at hand, which is about 21st century cures and the Center for Healthier Americans. So, for those who might not have been following this issue, basically the House and supported with by Representative DeGette, they basically did a lot of work to make this bill possible. The way they did it was through sort of roundtables and white papers, and they started doing briefings last year, actually, They put out 4 legislative drafts, and the result was a bill that was over 300 pages. When that bill moved through committee, it moved through in a unanimous way, which does not happen very often at the committee level. So there was no nay votes on that bill, which was great. And then it moved to the House floor for a vote, which was quite bipartisan. It was 344 to 77. And a lot of that was made possible from engagement from advocates and especially patients in the rare disease community. So we can thank you for that and for your efforts there. And basically that bill is passed the House, so the next stop is really to look over at the Senate. Next slide here. Great. So on the Senate side, they're calling their initiative Innovation for Healthier Americans. And what we're hoping is that the provisions that were included in the House side are actually mirrored on the Senate side, and there's quite a few in there. So I'm gonna run through them very quickly, and if you guys have questions on specific items, maybe we could do that at the end. But there's hundreds of millions in new funding for the FDA, billions in funding for the NIH. The Open Act was included. This is a bill that creates an incentive for companies to repurpose existing drugs for a rare disease indication. There's also language on patient-focused drug development, which has been definitely a very hot topic right now. There was also a piece about expanded access that would require companies to actually post information about their programs in this area online. The priority review voucher is something that is actually slated to expire next year, but the provision that was passed in the House bill would extend that program, I believe, until 2017. And then there's also some stuff on there about expanded access, which I mentioned earlier, and neurological disease surveillance program, which would help track the progression of various neurological diseases, including many of which that are rare. And there's also some stuff on biomarkers in there for FDA. So that's a lot of really important stuff for the rare disease community. I'm not going to run you through this, how a bill becomes law, but I'll give you the really quick summary here. We are done on the House side for the most part, and we are still waiting for a draft to come out on the Senate side so folks can look at that bill and actually provide comments and feedback. And that circle is off for some reason, but basically it's supposed to be circling the conference process, which is the point at which the House and the Senate, after they've each passed separate bills, that they actually bring them together and conference them. So the idea there is that the more similar that those bills are, the smoother and easier the conference process is, which will ultimately pave the way to get it to the President's desk. So on the Senate side, I want to talk a little bit about what's happened there. The Senate has released a white paper that outlines some of the sort of issues and topics that they wanted to address, and that came out back in January. The HELP Committee, the Senate HELP Committee, which stands for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, has held meetings with NIH and with FDA, as well as roundtables and briefings, but because of the fact that we still haven't seen any actual legislation yet, they're still significantly behind where the House is in the sort of legislative process. And so what we've been doing at EveryLife is working with the community to make sure that the Senate is hearing our message about basically making this a higher priority. We want it to be a top priority for the Senate, and I can imagine many of you took part in our National Action Alert 2 weeks ago where we asked advocates across the country to contact their senators. So here's what what we're hearing now, what the state of play is. We've heard that we can expect to see some draft legislation in the fall. We don't have a date yet, but that's what we've been told by committee staff. The Senate is taking a sort of different approach to the legislation than the House did. So what the House did was kind of put it all together in one sort of omnibus bill and voted on it in committee and then voted on the House floor as one big bill. But what the Senate is, we believe what they're planning to do is split it into separate sort of topic areas. So instead of having one big bill, we could be looking at several smaller bills which will have to be passed individually through the committee. So one of the challenges here that's worth mentioning is that in this sort of current political environment, anytime there's a proposal to increase funding for an agency or for a program, there pretty much always needs to be some way to pay for that. And so we see that as potentially being a big issue on the House side. In order to pay for the increases in funding for FDA and NIH, that committee was able to use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which was part of their jurisdiction on the Energy and Commerce Committee, to actually use that as a way to pay for those increases for FDA and NIH. So we're not sure how this is going to sort of play out on the Senate side, but we do know it's probably going to be potentially controversial. And I think, you know, if you're trying to discern what your role is here, I think for patients and advocates, we need to really stay on the Senate, keep reminding them that this is something that needs to be a priority, and that really a delay in legislation will result in a delay in treatments. And what I've shown here on the right is an action alert, which you can get on the Rare Advocates website, and there's also a link to that right from the presentation. So that link allows you to contact your senators and to remind them that this is something that we can't let lapse, that we can't forget about, and that the Senate needs to make a priority. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and would certainly welcome any questions out there. Feel free to, you can message them into us, or I think everyone is unmuted now, so feel free to ask away.
Are there any other questions on the line? I see one from David Eckstein that has to do with an issue that we will be covering in our next meeting. So I will take it on. And Max, I want to thank you for speaking today, speaking to the advocates and all the people on the call today about 21st Century Cures and the Innovation for Healthier Americans Act. Right now, I want to tell you a little bit about the upcoming Capitol Hill events that RDLA will be hosting with the Every Life Foundation. On November 4th, we'll be having our annual Community Congress meeting, followed by our Rare Voice Awards Gala. And then the next day, on November 5th, we will have the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus will be hosting a briefing on precision medicine. And then we have set the date for Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill, and that will take place February 29th to March 3rd. Okay, and our Community Congress annual meeting will take place the morning of November 4th at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. We will be featuring some keynote speakers, David Fajgenbaum, Dr. David Fajgenbaum, and the Honorable Dr. Brian Baird, former senator. Former Congressman Baird was from Washington State's 3rd District and is a lifelong rare disease advocate. He holds a PhD in clinical psychology and is the current president of 4 Peer 2 Communication, which specializes in policy and science communication. Dr. Fajgenbaum is the co-founder and executive director of the Castleman's Disease Collaborative Network and a research professor at UPenn. He was also named one of Forbes 40 Under 40 in the healthcare profession. So this meeting is for current members of the Community Congress and for those who are interested in learning more about the Community Congress. There's no cost to attend, but registration is required. To find out more information and to register, you can go to rarecongress.org. Again, that's rarecongress.org. Later that evening, we will be having our 4th annual Rare Voice Awards Gala. It's November 4th, 2015, at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. So we'll be focusing this gala on the accomplishments of 21st Century Cures. So we'll be honoring Reps Upton and DeGette, as well as staff from the Energy and Commerce Committee. So this is a very exciting event, and it's free and open to the entire rare disease community. If you're around D.C. or want to make a trip out of it, you will not be disappointed. This is a great event, and we look forward to seeing you all there. The next morning, on Capitol Hill, the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus will be hosting a briefing on precision medicine. This is a very hot topic that a lot of the rare disease community is looking towards. Speakers will include Matt Might, president and founder of the ngly1.org. He's also associate professor at University of Utah. We'll also have Aaron Gordon, director of clinical development from 23andMe, John Crowley, a parent advocate and CEO of Amicus Therapeutics, and many more speakers. This is going to be a great briefing, and I encourage any of those interested in precision medicine to come to this briefing. We'll be sending out email invites for this briefing, but to register now, you can go to rareadvocates.org/congressional-briefings. Okay, and next year, coming up just around the corner, is Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. This is a very exciting event happening February 29th, which is Rare Disease Day, through March 3rd, 2016. Registration will open January 4th of next year, and we encourage all rare disease patients, their families, caregivers, and advocates throughout the community to come to DC and help raise the voice of rare disease patients on Capitol Hill. There's a week worth of events that I'm going to go through very shortly. It's in Washington, D.C., and it's free to attend. There will be travel stipends made available. For more information and to see pictures from the previous year's events, you can go to rareadvocates.org/RDW. Stands for Rare Disease Week. Again, that's rareadvocates.org/RDW. We've put up our preliminary schedule, which will start on Monday, the 29th, at the NIH. They will be hosting Rare Disease Day. Later that evening, we'll be hosting a rare disease documentary screening and cocktail reception. Followed by on Tuesday, we'll be hosting our legislative conference at FHI 360. On Wednesday, March 2nd, we'll have our lobby day, breakfast and lobby day, where about 200 advocates from the rare disease community will meet with their congressional representatives and talk to them about the issues the rare disease community is facing. On Thursday, March 3rd, the Congressional Rare Disease Caucus will host a briefing. And later that day, on Thursday, March 3rd, we will have our Rare Artist Reception on Capitol Hill. So again, these are a lot of fabulous events that are all free and open to the rare disease community. If you are interested in joining any of these events, you can go to rareadvocates.org/RDW to find out more. Like I said, travel stipends will be available. You can apply online from now to December 31st. And we will grant as many travel stipends as possible and notify winners on July 4th. Stipends are provided through the Rare Giving Program, which ensures Congress and the FDA and other government agencies will have the opportunity to hear directly from patients. Advocates must attend the legislative conference to receive their travel stipend, and travel stipends will be given out at the conference during registration. Advocates must present a photo ID and provide their Social Security number and sign for the check. Stipends can be used for any travel expenses, hotel, food, airfare, gas, and parking, and they usually range from $300 to $1,000, depending on the distance the recipient has to travel. And you can only apply for one travel stipend per family. Right. So if you have any questions on any of the material covered today, you can email me at arussell@everylifefoundation.org. I received a question earlier asking our thoughts on Congressman Rooney and Congressman Vargas' introduction of the Rare Disease Fund Act of 2015, H.R. 3731. This is a very high-profile piece of legislation that was that was profiled in Forbes last week and generated a lot of buzz. We will be having a speaker and legislative director from Vargas's office. He will speak on the next RDLA meeting, November 18th at 2 o'clock Eastern, and we'll have some more speakers. So remember, November 18th at 2 o'clock Eastern, we'll be having our next RDLA meeting, and we'll be featuring some speakers about some really pertinent legislation. All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining the call today. A reminder, this call was recorded, and we will be posting it on rareadvocates.org/monthly meetings. Again, if you have any questions about any of the material covered today on today's meeting, feel free to email me or call me at 415-884-0223. Right now, I'm going to open up the line, and if there are any lasting questions that anybody on the line has, feel free to ask them now. And I just want to thank everybody for joining today. All right, are there any questions out on the line? Okay, seeing as, oh, no. All right, seeing as that there are no questions on the line, I will be wrapping up the call. I want to thank everybody for joining today and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.